I didn't expect a simple wooden box to completely destroy a family dinner. But I also didn't expect my own mother to look my 8-year-old daughter right in the eye and pretend she simply did not exist. For 8 long years we stayed silent. We watched the blatant favoritism, the whispers, the cruel little games over who shared true blood. But my late father left a secret locked inside that cedar box. And tonight, over a perfect Christmas roast, my little girl is going to make sure my mother loses absolutely everything. I am an Army JAG officer, a major. I measure my entire life in facts, in evidence, in thresholds of proof, and in the quiet discipline of military law. I deal with the concrete, the undeniable, the absolute truths that can be proven in a court-martial. When I finally came home from a grueling 7-month deployment in Germany, the very first thing I did was not drop my heavy duffel bags on the floor or check the mail that had piled up on the kitchen counter. I walked straight down the hallway, opened the closet, and looked at the top shelf. Sitting right there in the dark was a handcrafted cedar box. My husband, Eli, had carefully moved it from our storage unit while I was overseas. It was exactly where it was supposed to be. My daughter, Maya, came to us from foster care when she was just 8 months old. I still remember the day we brought her home. She had big, quiet eyes and a way of holding onto your finger like she was terrified you would disappear into thin air. She is ours. In every conceivable way that matters in this vast, complicated universe, she is my heartbeat. But to my mother, Patricia, Maya was a stain on the Immaculate Family Portrait. A charity project. An outsider who didn't carry our DNA. We kept a binder, Eli and I. A thick, heavy black binder filled with 8 years of quiet, calculated betrayals. It started small, the way toxicity usually does. Page after page of holiday cards where Maya's name was conveniently forgotten, or squeezed at the very bottom in tiny ink, almost as an afterthought. There were printed transcripts of voicemails from Aunt Linda complaining to my mother about having to host the adopted one for Easter Sunday. My back is not what it used to be, Pat, she would say, as if a toddler required heavy lifting. And my mother never corrected her. Just for an hour, Linda, she would reply. We had screenshots of cheap, $5 single-use gift cards handed to Maya, while her cousins, Sophie and Jackson, tore into expensive electronics, massive Lego sets, and fine jewelry. People often wonder how a grandmother could harbor such ice-cold hatred toward an innocent infant. In behavioral psychology, this kind of cruelty rarely stems from the child herself. Maya was merely a mirror. Patricia defined her entire existence through the power of her bloodline, maintaining a perfect, unbroken genetic hierarchy. It gave her a sense of aristocratic control over a family of suburbanites. An adopted child completely shattered that illusion. She hated Maya because my father, Walter, loved the girl unconditionally. From the moment he saw her, she was his granddaughter. His love proved that true devotion couldn't be bought, couldn't be inherited by DNA, and couldn't be controlled by Patricia's arbitrary rules. And that terrified my mother. She needed to punish Maya to re-establish her throne. The invitation for the Christmas Eve dinner arrived on a Tuesday morning, while I was making pancakes. The text on my phone read, "Bringing presents for the kids, Sophie and Jackson get something special, Maya's welcome too, of course." That, of course, hung in the air like a dropped stone in a quiet pond. It was designed to hurt. It was designed to remind us of our place. Eli just looked at me, his jaw tight. He stood up, walked into his office, pulled out the black binder, logged the text message, and slipped it into plastic sleeve number 47. We were ready. My father had seen all of this happening before his heart failed him. He saw it before we even realized how deep the rot went. He was a carpenter, a man who understood how to build things meant to last, and he recognized that the foundation of our family was rotting from the inside out. He was the reason we had a plan. I tucked Maya into bed that night. She held Walter's dented dog tag in her small hand. "Mom," she whispered, "will Grandma read Grandpa's letter this Christmas?" I smoothed her hair. "Maybe she will," I said. "But if she won't, I will read it for her." I told her brave wasn't about not being scared. Brave was being scared and still walking to the table. The next morning, the snow fell thick over Minnesota. I told Maya to put on her favorite red velvet dress, the one with the white tights and black Mary Janes. I didn't wear a festive sweater. I put on my military service blues, the polished name tape, the ribbons. I pinned my father's dented silver dog tag from Vietnam under my collar so I could feel the cold metal against my skin, a physical reminder of the man who set this trap. Eli carried the cedar box to the car, hiding it under Maya's booster seat. We drove into the falling snow, heading toward Stillwater. The house in Stillwater looked like a postcard, a beautiful two-story Victorian with fresh balsam wreaths and warm porch lights. But inside, it smelled like roasted brisket and suffocating hypocrisy. The driveway was already packed with my sister Heather's SUV and Aunt Linda's Buick. We walked in, the brass bell on the door ringing sharply. Patricia met us in the foyer. She hugged Heather warmly. She kissed Sophie's hair. She patted Jackson on the shoulder. But when she looked at Maya, her face went completely flat. She looked straight past my daughter like she was a coat hung on the wrong hook. "Oh," she said, "you brought her." Of course. She didn't even offer Maya a plate for the Christmas cookies laid out on the kitchen counter. There were only 3 plates set out with names on them. None for my daughter. Without a single word, Eli reached up, grabbed a clean plate himself, put 2 cookies on it and handed it to Maya. He didn't make a scene. He just corrected the failure. Patricia's lips pinched together in a thin, disapproving line. She tried to force a polite smile. The silent war had officially begun. I leaned against the doorframe and listened to Aunt Linda whispering by the stove. "You don't have to make a fuss for Maya, Pat," she hissed. "She's not really family, you said it best." Patricia laughed softly. "Well, you said it. It's crucial to understand the rules of this kind of social warfare. Power in toxic families is always maintained through unwritten laws. In my family, the law was absolute. DNA dictates your human worth. Toxicity isn't just about yelling or physical abuse. It's about the public humiliation carefully designed to reinforce the social hierarchy. It is the 1,000 tiny cuts of being overlooked, excluded, and diminished in front of an audience. When Patricia set the dining table, a grand spread of green and gold with 12 elegant seats, there was no chair for Maya among the adults. Just a flimsy folding chair pushed into the far corner with a paper Santa plate and a juice box. Eli didn't argue. He calmly picked up the folding chair, walked it across the room, wedged it right between his seat and mine at the main table, and sat Maya down. He moved the paper plate and juice box over. He held her elbow gently. "Maya sits with us, Pat," he said, his voice as smooth as glass. "Always has." Patricia gasped lightly, her face reddening, trying to cover her shock by loudly asking Heather to pass the bread rolls. Maya sat quietly between us, her little boots resting gently on the leather strap of the cedar box she had pulled from her coat and hidden under her chair. Dinner was a marathon of passive aggression. Aunt Linda told the same old stories. Heather asked polite, shallow questions about Germany, ignoring my daughter entirely. Patricia complimented her own cooking over and over. Maya ate her food silently, biting the edges of her cookies first, exactly the way Walter had taught her. She kept one foot on the box. I kept my hand near hers. When it was time for gifts, Patricia stood up, holding court. She handed out an iPad Pro to Sophie, making a huge display of the $1,200 price tag. She handed a Nintendo Switch OLED to Jackson. Then she walked over to the side table, picked up a small, flat envelope and walked over to Maya. She handed it to her with 2 hands, making a grand ceremony of it. "Here you go, sweetheart," she cooed. "Merry Christmas." Maya opened it. An empty drugstore card with a printed snowman. No money. No note. Just empty paper. Sophie, bless her heart, put down her expensive tablet. "Mom," she said, "why didn't Maya get a real present?" My sister Heather hissed at her own daughter to shut up. "She's our cousin." Sophie protested. "She's adopted," Heather shot back, the word dropping from her mouth like a slur. "Sophie, eat your pie." Why was Maya so incredibly calm? Why didn't my 8-year-old cry? The science of childhood trauma tells us that children trapped in environments of constant, predictable rejection develop a defense mechanism called controlled dissociation. Maya's amygdala was used to the sting. She didn't react because her brain had categorized my mother's hatred as a daily survival fact. But more importantly, the unconditional love from Eli and Walter had already rewired her hippocampus. She knew her worth wasn't tied to the empty paper in her small hands. She knew her value did not come from the mouth of the bitter woman standing at the head of the table. My mother tapped her expensive wine glass with a butter knife. She gave a grandiose speech about family, about how blood comes first. She raised a toast to the children she considered her true legacy. I didn't raise my glass. Eli didn't raise his. Then, Patricia casually mentioned her grand plans for my father's lake cabin. She bragged to the whole table about the thousands of dollars she was making renting it out as a vacation home on Airbnb. She talked about adding a screened porch to maximize her profits this summer. She smiled, so utterly confident in her stolen wealth, confident in her absolute control over our lives. She was monetizing something she did not own, right in front of the child who owned it. I looked at Maya. I gave her the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. Maya neatly folded her napkin. She slid off the folding chair, reached underneath, and pulled out the heavy cedar box with both hands. It was heavier than she was used to. She walked the long way around the dining table. The wood floor creaked under her little shoes. The entire room went dead silent. Everyone watched an 8-year-old girl march toward the head of the table like a soldier. She placed the box right against Patricia's dinner plate. She stood at attention, chin up, just like my father had taught her in his woodshop. And in a steady, crystal-clear voice she said, "Grandma, Mom told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." Patricia stared at the box. Then she stared at me. Aunt Linda let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh, asking if this was some sort of tasteless joke. "Open it, Mom," I commanded. My voice wasn't a daughter's voice anymore. It was the voice of a JAG officer standing in a military tribunal. Patricia's hand shook as she unlatched the brass hook. The smell of linseed oil and cedar smoke filled the tense air. Inside, neatly stacked, were 3 things: a thick manila folder, a sealed cream envelope, and a photograph of my father holding a 2-year-old Maya, both of them grinning on the lake dock. Patricia's face drained of all color. She made a pathetic choking sound. She opened the manila folder and began to read. I stood up. I planted both feet firmly. I didn't yell. I spoke with absolute terrifying precision. The Holland Family Trust is irrevocable. It was executed by Dad on June 14, 2 years ago. The sole beneficiary of this trust is Maya Rose Andrews. The trust property includes the lake cabin, $80,000 in treasury bonds, and all the proceeds from the sale of his shop tools. Patricia gasped, her eyes darting across the legal seals and notarized signatures. She started shaking violently, but I wasn't finished. I stepped closer. From the exact date of my father's death, you did not own that cabin. You did not have the legal authority to rent it to strangers. The audit clause in Section 7 of the trust requires the recovery of all rental income, plus 7% interest. By my calculation, you owe Maya's trust $103,000. The legal audit begins January 7th. Patricia screamed. A raw, terrifying, wordless shriek that tore out of her throat. She gripped her wine glass so hard the stem snapped, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth like blood. He gave the cabin to her. She shrieked, pointing a shaking, manic finger at Maya. Her sister, Linda, fluttered around, frantically saying they would hire a lawyer, repeating the same toxic line that Maya wasn't really family. But the rest of the table? They completely froze. There is a tragic, unavoidable paradox in enabling families. The primary abuser is always fueled by an ecosystem of absolute silence. For 8 years, my sister Heather and her husband David didn't stab anyone in the back. They just stayed quiet. They smiled politely, looked at their plates, and claimed they just wanted to keep the peace. Philosopher Hannah Arendt famously called this the banality of evil. Choosing not to intervene on behalf of an abused child means you have actively chosen the side of the abuser. But as the irrevocable will was read, my relatives suddenly realized their years of cowardice bought them no safety at all. They just looked like cheap, pathetic accomplices in the eyes of their own children. Heather looked up and saw her daughter, Sophie, staring at her in absolute horror. The illusion of the perfect, blood-tied family was completely, permanently broken. I walked over to the head of the table. I took the sealed cream envelope from the box, broke the wax seal, and read my father's handwritten letter aloud to the silent room. He detailed every slight, every insult, every passive-aggressive comment he had witnessed Patricia make over the years. He wrote, "I will not have my granddaughter left empty-handed by a woman who measures human worth by a twisted yardstick of bloodlines. She is my granddaughter in every sense that matters." I folded the letter. We didn't stay for the apple pie. Eli helped Maya into her winter coat, grabbed the empty cedar box, and we walked toward the door. I turned back one last time. I looked at Patricia, who was sobbing into her hands, stripped of her pride, her property, and her illusions. The cabin will be cleared by July 1st. Do not call us. Do not write. The brass bell on the door rang as we walked out into the freezing Minnesota night. The cold air never felt so impossibly clean. Maya sat in the back seat of the SUV, her hand resting flat on the lid of the cedar box. She leaned her head against the window and whispered, "It's our cabin now, Mom." "Yes, baby," I said, wiping a single tear from my eye. "It is all yours." By March, the legal audit was settled. Patricia, humiliated and out of options, wired the $103,000 to Maya's trust account. We cut all contact. Heather sent one brief email apologizing, but the damage was done. The silence from that side of the family wasn't a heavy burden. It was liberating. To anyone out there watching this, anyone who is currently protecting a child from the subtle storms of toxic relatives, hear this clearly. You will have dark nights where you wonder if the fights are worth it. If staying quiet and absorbing the insults just keeps the peace. The answer from the silence of my father's woodshop is no. A family environment that forces your child to shrink themselves just to fit in is no family at all. Do not fear breaking the fragile illusion of a perfect holiday dinner table. The greatest bravery you can show as a parent isn't teaching your child how to endure prejudice gracefully. The greatest bravery is holding their hand, walking out the front door, and building a brand new table where the light truly, finally belongs to them. Disclaimer: this video is created for the sole purpose of entertainment. All situations, characters, and stories in this video are fictional and are built entirely using artificial intelligence technology. We hope you have a relaxing time.